Hello, everybody. Welcome to Let's Talk Football. My name is John Halpin alongside Chris Palmer. Chris Palmer, how are we doing today?
Doing good, man. Here we are. It is the second to last episode of the year.
Yes, and so we're recording this the Wednesday prior to the Super Bowl. We already made our Super Bowl episode, so in case you missed it, the link will be in the description so you can check it out. We're in for a great Super Bowl, but before that, we want to just kind of take a moment to talk about this whole season, because there was a lot that happened this season, and just kind of have a year in review. Just kind of talk about some stuff that happened throughout the year.
Yeah, without a doubt, this was such an exciting year. But like you said, a lot happened, both good and bad.
Yeah, so let's start with the good. So, Chris Palmer, let me ask you a simple question. What do you think was the game of the year in the NFL? Let's start with the good, because there was a lot of good that came out of this season.
You're absolutely right. There was a lot of good this year. Game of the year to me would probably have to be that Bills-Vikings game in the early onset of the year. It kind of set the tone and the pace for the year as to what it was going to be. The headhunters of this league were going to show themselves early, and that's exactly what happened that game in particular.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Man, I would love to go with that game. And to me, that probably is game of the year, but I got to also give a shout out to the wild card game between the Jags and the Chargers.
100% honorable mention.
And honestly, I liked that more than the 33-point comeback by the Vikings and the Colts.
That was a fluke.
His historic comeback. But I think the Jags-Chargers was a little bit better because it was the quintessential game of a tale of two halves. And it changed our perception of how we view the Jaguars because of that game.
100%.
Prior to this year, the Jags have been an absolute laughingstock. And now, with an impressive 27-point comeback against the Chargers, a really formidable opponent, it has changed how we look at Jacksonville. They look like serious contenders for years to come. And it was really with that win. I thought that win was just so impactful and a phenomenal game to watch.
When it comes to Jacksonville, I really hope that was the final tipping point that put them in that conversation where there are going to be playoff contenders for years to come. I like Trevor Lawrence from watching him in college. I like the Jaguars. I've always had a soft spot for the Jaguars. I always thought when they do good, it's good for the league because they're like one of the newcomers of the league and they should be doing well. Mm-hmm. When it comes to a franchise as a whole, they're one of the younger franchises. I like what Trevor Lawrence is doing there. I feel like at first I felt bad for him. I'm not even going to sugarcoat that. I felt bad for him. I thought he was in a real bad situation with Urban Meyer. Pretty bad. But now you have the coach. They are investing in you. I can't wait to see what the Jags have in store.
I know. And that's the thing. Like, we're really looking forward to the Jaguars this upcoming 2023 season. So that to me, if not the Bills, Vikings, I thought the Jags, Chargers is definitely in there for consideration.
Definitely an honorable mention. That was those were the two that I was kind of torn between.
Yeah.
I love it. What do you think is the worst game of the year?
Oh, we're getting into our bad now. We're going into the bad.
No. We're do one for one. Do best and worst, best and worst.
Man, you know what? Surprisingly, don't get us wrong. We love the NFL and think that the games are phenomenal. But let's be honest, there were some bad games this year.
Some hard games.
There were some really bad games to watch this year. And by bad, it's just it's just not entertaining to watch. It just felt very slow. Nothing was happening on defense. Nothing was happening on offense. And it was just very a chore to watch. To me, to answer your question, I think the worst game of the year was probably the Broncos-Colts.
Okay.
That Thursday night game. It was nothing but field goals, and it was just really showcased how both the Broncos and the Colts were going to be big disappointments this year. That was early on. That was about week 5 or so where that happened. And we just kind of all squinted and was like, oh, are we really watching this game? There were not a lot of good Thursday night primetime games this year.
No, they were not. And it's funny that when you think about a lot of the air quoted worst games of the year, Denver is kind of involved in a lot of them.
Oh yeah. Oh
But
yeah.
when I think about it, I go back to I think it's either week 2 or week 3. Bills versus the Titans,
Oh, that was week 2.
42-7. The Bills beat the Titans, and that's when everyone's head turned at the Titans and was like, "Where the hell did you guys go?" I think that should be an honorable mention for one of the worst games of the year.
It was a game for the first 5 minutes, and then it was
that was
all
it.
Bills. And then it was all Bills all day. They just absolutely put on a show that day. It was just the Bills show that day. And man, there were, looking back, there was seeing the downfall of the Titans is pretty upsetting because they were the first seed last year.
That's what I'm saying.
That's crazy to think about. Is like they were a team that they went 14-3 last year. Had the first seed, lost to the Bengals, as we know, but they went, what was it, 7-9 this year? No, 7-10.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, they lost their last couple games, and it was. Granted, a lot of people were injured, but at the same time, they just couldn't do it. I mean, you think we're going to see more Malik Willis next year?
I really hope that we see more Malik Willis. I said it during the season. I'll say it till it happens. Until they give that kid the chance to really go out and take the team and move on from Ryan Tannehill, they are not going to succeed. They just won't.
Yeah, Tannehill, I think he hits the free agent market this
let him go
offseason.
Let him go.
And I'm sure a team would be very willing to pick him up, probably the Saints.
Jets.
The Jets are desperate.
He's a great bridge quarterback.
Okay, wait. Can we talk about the Jets for a second?
Go ahead.
What the fuck happened with the Jets?
The Jets going to jet. That's what's going to happen.
They really... their problems now stem from their draft last year. Because think about it. When they did not have Zach Wilson, or didn't ask Zach Wilson to do much, when everyone was healthy around Zach Wilson and was like, hey, look, you're just going to be in for a good ride. The Jets went 7-2.
Right.
They lost a lot of their games in the final stretch because of Zach Wilson. And because injuries also got the best of them too. But now you're heading into offseason with question marks at your quarterback situation. And obviously, much like the Ravens, you don't want that because that leads to a lot of uncertainty. But it's really stemmed for the Jets where it's like they were so committed to Zach Wilson when they drafted Trevor Lawrence first overall to the Jags. It was a guarantee that they were going to draft Zach Wilson from BYU.
Right.
A guarantee. And you and I, we questioned that. We were like, why so insistent on Zach Wilson? And it turns out that, lo and behold, it was the wrong pick. You know who they probably should have gone for? Justin Fields.
Well, yeah, they overlooked Justin Fields. They overlooked Trey Lance. They overlooked a lot of young talent for Zach Wilson. You know, and you guys, and ranting and raving, saying this guy's the guy. He's the next Brett Favre. He's this, that, the third. You know who he looks like to me after that one press conference where he decided to take no accountability for not throwing a touchdown in 2 games? Baker Mayfield. He is another Baker Mayfield where he feels that he doesn't need to work at what he does.
Mm-hmm.
He feels his talent is going to get him by. And I'm not going to take away from him. The kid's young and talented.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. That's only going to get you so far on this league.
He needs discipline as a player. And I think that comes from coaching.
He fell into the worst possible scenario when it comes to wanting to learn how to become a disciplined quarterback. And a disciplined player as a whole. You know, the team is still very young and getting it together, and you can't have someone who is he's very immature as a quarterback, you can tell, with Zach Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he has a lot of maturity issues. And when it comes to the question marks of the Jets as to who's going to be their quarterback, the answer is pretty clear that it is not going to be him.
Yeah, the Jets are looking to pick up someone in the offseason. It could be Ryan Tannehill, as we alluded to before. It could be Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo. They're looking to replace Zach Wilson.
Out of those 3, Derek Carr, Jimmy G, or Ryan Tannehill, who would you take?
For the Jets?
Yeah.
Derek Carr.
Okay.
Because he is reliable and he is consistent. And I think those are the two things that Zach Wilson lacks. Where like Derek Carr, we know he's a consistent B to B plus quarterback. He's not in the best scenario in Vegas, and Vegas is looking to move off Derek Carr.
And he knows it, which is really funny.
And he knows it too. So, but I think that's the one thing is like maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to get Derek Carr to the Jets because you surround him with a lot of young guys, you have an experienced quarterback and a lot of young guys. So you're not relying on him, but you know when Breece Hall gets healthy, Michael Carter, you get that good running game as well. Garrett Wilson, who's an emerging rookie receiver for the Jets. And then that defense. Robert Saleh for the Jets, he's a defensive coordinator. And their defense was impressive this year. But it was their offense that lost them games.
Yeah.
Where they just failed to just score points. That second game against the Patriots in Foxborough, where it was a 3-3 game, the whole game, until the last play on a punt return by New England, and just but you're telling me you can't score, like you can't get anything more than a field goal
all game?
All game?
And that's bad for both sides. Like,
I mean, yeah,
you want to talk about
Patriots can't go with the
plummet of New England, man.
Oh my god! I said New England, and the first play I thought of that play against the Raiders.
Ugh.
You remember that?
That was on. What was that? What happened there?
So the final play was 24-24, and and what was it? Stevenson runs it for the.
Oh, is that when he throws it back?
And then laterals back to Jacoby Myers, and then Jacoby Myers tries to lateral back to Mac Jones, and Chandler Jones picks it off and face palms Mac Jones.
Doing right. See, what I thought of immediately when it comes to another one of a blunder that was a Raiders play, because you said Raiders, and I thought of when Devontae Adams and
Hunter Renfrow ran into each other.
Ran into each other at the end of the game.
Oh my god, that play! It's crazy too. Like again, looking back, there's so many memorable moments, some good and some bad, but it's like holy crap, man! You think about it, it's like. Yeah, I remember that. And that was Monday Night Primetime against the Chiefs, and they had a lead. They had like a
they were going to win that game.
And then they just imploded. Yeah. Actually, what was it? I think the Raiders actually blew the most two possession games this year. I think it was like 6 or 7 they blew. I mean, granted, I will say, the Ravens are no better because we blew a lot of games this year. That was so frustrating.
It's funny that you say the word implosion, though. You want to... Implosion of the year is in Arizona.
Oh,
you remember all the shit that happened in Arizona?
Yeah, you know what? It started even before the season started with Kyler Murray's contract and his contract, and it's just
and then it just spiraled out of control. It wound up with, I think, the biggest part of the implosion was when the head coach was fired immediately for inappropriate touching in New Mexico.
It was a coordinator,
during the Mexico game.
No, but you know how just bad office management is in Arizona. To think about this is like they got rid of Cliff Kingsbury, but they still are paying him for another 2 years.
Sounds like Cleveland.
Yeah,
sounds like Cleveland. They were paying, what was it, two quarterbacks at one time to not play for them. It was Deshaun and Baker both paying them at the same time to not play for them.
I mean, good on the Browns for beating the Panthers week 1 because it's like at least you beat Baker.
I mean, you tried. Good for you.
They tried. I mean, let me ask you this: what are your expectations for the Browns this offseason? Because now that Deshaun's going to have a full season back, I mean, granted, he was a whole other thing even before the season started. His whole ordeal was
just an enigma.
It was just a big elephant in the room that just couldn't be ignored, and everyone knew it. And that was something that the Browns were like, you know what? Despite all those legal allegations, we're going to pay this man $250 million guaranteed.
Right. And then he's going to come back after not playing for 2 years, and he's going to play 4 games for us, and we'll be okay.
So what are your expectations for Cleveland this year?
Not much. I don't have much expectations for them because even though Deshaun's going to have another like a full season, he's never going to be what he was after not playing for 2 years.
I completely agree.
You know what I mean? Like 2 years off of anything is a long time, and then you simply can't move the way you did. You know, and you can tell for a simple fact that for the 2 years that he was not playing football, he was not training at all with just how rusty he was when he came back. So I feel like before the season's out next year, they will be looking to trade Deshaun Watson. You know, they are going to have to eat that, and they're going to have to move on.
I think give it 2 years, 2 years time, because he signed a 4-year extension. I think they'll probably want to get rid of him for in that
go at least half on it,
until they realize like, what have I done? What have I done?
I feel like they started getting a piece of that too. Like because if you remember, there was I forgot when it was. Like he played I think 2 games, and then the third game that he was supposed to start, they wound up playing Bridgewater anyway. So it was like, oh no, Jacoby Brissett. I'm sorry, They wound up playing Brissett because Brissett was playing well enough for them not to lose for a while prior to Deshaun Watson coming in. You know, I'm not saying he was the reason why they were winning games, but he was not the reason they were losing games.
Well, I will say he actually did win them that game against Tampa. And we also think about disappointments this year. I mean, granted, there were a lot of disappointing teams, but I think also you hit the nail right on the head at the first week of the season. Tom Brady was going to have his worst year, and the Bucs were a big disappointment to watch this year.
Oh, my God.
They were
total disappointment.
8-9, Brady's first losing season as a starter. He's now retired as of this moment, so let's see if he stays retired. But he should be retired. But nevertheless, like the Bucs were a very disappointing team this year.
100%. They were one of, if not the most disappointing teams of the year. It's unfortunate that I called that Tom Brady was going to have his worst statistical year. You know, but, you know, it's kind of set in stone. Not really set in stone, but it comes to fruition a lot when it comes to the all-time greats. Their last year is usually their worst year.
Typically.
You know, Peyton Manning, you think about that year. This terrible year.
Dan Marino.
Look at, and even going closer in the timeline, look at Ben Roethlisberger.
That's true. Drew Brees.
Now, Ben Roethlisberger was 3 years overdue, so you can look at the past 3 years and you're like, that should have been it. That should have been it. Okay, what are you doing? Why aren't you gone?
his last year, and honestly, you know, I think that's a good comparison to how like his last year was with Roethlisberger and Brady, because they were surrounded by a capable team, but they just were not the reason that they could push the ball down the field, and because their offense was so limited, and they just couldn't do like the Bucs. They couldn't run the ball. And by the time the Steelers could run the ball, they couldn't throw the ball. And I think that they just, by the time they both went into the playoffs, because they were both playoff caliber teams at the time, they just got absolutely blown out.
You know what I was actually just thinking about that both of them shared in their seasons? Both of their final seasons, the teams had the highest pass attempts in the league and the least amount of run attempts. Remember when Ben Roethlisberger's final season came in, we were told, why aren't they running the ball? We have Najee Harris. We had the most pass attempts that year. You look at this year, Tom Brady's last year, they were the highest pass attempts in the league.
Oh, by far.
By far. And that just shows it. That's kind of where, to me, it kind of comes to fruition, because if you think back to Peyton Manning's last year, they didn't run the ball either.
No, they did. They actually, in Peyton Manning's last year, they ran the ball extremely successful with C.J. Anderson and Noshawn Moreno.
Oh, you're right. Never mind.
But that's a good point, because that goes to a lot of points that we made earlier in the year, where it's like you got to run the ball, you got to have a balanced offense. And look, the two best teams that have done that throughout the year and had a balanced offense and a balanced run game to complement it, or vice versa, are the Chiefs and the Eagles.
Well, yeah, that's why they are where they are.
That's why they are where they are. And it's like the teams that are able to have that, to strive for that balance in running it and throwing it, are the teams that are going to be successful in offense. And obviously, yes, the Chiefs are a little bit more pass heavy on offense, but if you look at their rushing statistics, they actually try to run the ball, especially in the playoffs when they played against not only the Jags but also the Bengals as well.
And what's good now with them going into the Super Bowl, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is cleared.
He's clear, and they have a great running.
But you know who's actually out now? Michael Hardman.
Yeah, he's out. But but they still have good depth.
Oh, without doubt.
So they won't be, and that's the thing too. Is like a lot of teams this year. Granted, there were injuries on every team, but the teams that were really that you got to see that were top heavy, where it's like their team really tanked in a specific area of the field when one player got hurt. And prime example is the Ravens and Lamar. Lamar got hurt, and we were not the same team at all. And granted, we are a good running team, and we had a great running game. But with Lamar's, like we couldn't score any more than 17 points a game, and it was just pathetic. But that when Lamar's on the field, we strive that balance. He has a lot of games where he has over 100 yards passing and 100 yards rushing, and the team has 100 yards rushing, and that's how we typically win games, by running it for 200 yards and stuff. But I think that, teams have to be willing to run the ball, have to be willing to have a balanced offense, because that's just something that we've talked about ubiquitously throughout the year.
Yeah, without a doubt. And leading back to Tom Brady's final season where they just did not run the ball. It's just, they also didn't have the best run game. You had an aged Leonard Fournette,
But they didn't even try to run the ball.
They didn't even try. You didn't even try. You tried to force a relationship between Tom Brady and Mike Evans. And now I understand that worked for a year for the Super Bowl run. It worked for a year. Good. But that was also because you had the safety net in Gronkowski.
Mm-hmm.
And then later in the year, you had Antonio Brown, even though he did not finish the year with them.
Well, he started midway their Super Bowl year.
Right.
And then finished the year after in MetLife.
Right. So he did not do a full season. But even while he's there, you cannot take away that man's hands.
Oh, no.
That man is absolutely an issue when he's on the sidelines. When he is an active player, he's an issue. So you have to focus him, or else he will burn you, and he'll burn you bad.
Mm-hmm.
So when you find chemistry in one, you have a 3-person arsenal, and you can give it to Mike Evans, and now you fast forward to this year, you pretty much only have Mike Evans.
Yeah, because Chris Godwin came back injured. Julio Jones was injured. They picked him up in free agency, and he was injured throughout the year. Leonard Fournette, aside from the first game of the year against the Cowboys, they didnn't really try to run the ball out of that point. They actually had not only the lowest amount of rushing yards, but also the lowest amount of rushing attempts in the league. So that's something that we've discussed time and time again. You got to run the ball. And not only do you have to at least try to run the ball, but the core of your team's success is also going to be derived from your offensive line. And
they had a number 20. I think it was 28th ranked offensive line.
The Bucs had actually like one of the worst ranked offensive lines in the league, passing and obviously running as well. But they did have a lot of injuries there on the offensive line. But that's the thing too, is like what I said a couple minutes ago, where it's like you get one injury and it just affects and derails the whole team. The one injury to their center. Obviously, there was other injuries as it went on, but
that's the point.
Before the season started, Ryan Jensen, their Pro Bowl caliber center, got injured, and because of that,
or something, he was out for most of the year.
Yeah, he was out for the whole year. But that one injury, and then you have the ripple effect is you have no running game, and that completely killed you throughout the year. And I think that teams need a willingness to run the ball. They need to be disciplined, a little bit of luck when it comes to the injury gods as well, because obviously you can't really tell injuries, but you also need depth in case of that. And I think that teams that show a lot of depth in various positions, that really shows that how well coached they are, where it's like you can plug in players and still do what is required in order to win games.
You see, and that's a really good point. And here's the thing. It's a 52-man roster. So you have 52 people to put out. I'd say you get 33 starters when it comes to offense, defense, and special teams. 33 starters.
Mm-hmm.
So you have just over a dozen players left to mess with when it comes to roster depth.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the most important part, you know me, I'm an offensive line guy. That's where you should have most of your depth.
Mm-hmm.
You have one or two extra receivers, but most of your depth, I feel, should go into the offensive line. And you got to have versatile offensive linemen. We're getting into the age now where I was saying it earlier this year, where we're moving away from position-specific players. They're just becoming more playmakers. That can happen in the offensive line, too, where you have an offensive lineman who can play guard, center, guard on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Or they can play tackle to tackle every position effectively.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now it's instead of having, like you look at a draft list, instead of it being left tackle, left guard, center, right tackle, right guard, it's offensive line.
Mm-hmm. I think in some scouting departments they do that, but I see what you mean. It's like, again, you need a versatility of players, and we see that a lot in a lot of the successful teams that are really willing to do. The best example for that is probably San Francisco.
Oh yeah,
where
versatile team of the year.
Yeah, because not only their offensive line can also, aside from their center, obviously, the center is a very different piece than a guard or a tackle, but you have offensive linemen that are, willing to switch around wherever is necessary. Wherever the pressure demands them to be, that's where they will be. And obviously the playmakers are so versatile as well. But I think that, again, look at who had the two best offensive lines in the league. Philly and the Chiefs.
Right.
And where are they?
Listen,
They're in Arizona right now.
I'm going to be outright. I feel like Philadelphia has the best offensive line I've ever seen in a football team.
It's up there. It's one of the best I've seen.
They work with such a fluidity together and a unity that can only be put in the conversation with like that 90s Dallas offensive line. It's just you just know they're mean, they're nasty, they want to get to the second level, and they just want to cause a lot of issues.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the same thing on Kansas City, man. That's an all-time offensive line right there.
The Chiefs actually have the number one ranked passing offense according to Pro Football Focus. And I mean, it obviously helps that you have Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball too, and Andy Reid calling the plays too. So, but that's the thing too. Is again, look at the two best offensive lines, and they're right there, right in the Super Bowl. And it's a shame that we won't see the Kelsey brothers on the same field at the same time. But honestly, that's where. And one thing that we talked about last week in our Super Bowl video was really look at the trenches. That's where we're going to see where the game is won or lost, is going to be a battle in the trenches.
Yeah, and that fight, honestly, I don't know if I said it in that episode, but I feel like that fight in the trenches is going to be won after the first quarter. You're going to realize who really wants to come to play. It's going to be a pace that's going to be set by one team, and the other team is just simply not going to be able to match.
Mm-hmm. I just love how we just naturally came back to the Super Bowl.
Well, it's because, again, this game is... There's so much to talk about.
You know what? All the season, everything that we talk about in the season, it leads to this point here, right on Sunday, and we're so looking forward to it. But before anything, let's just have a little peek into what to expect for the off season, because there's going to be a lot of moving parts.
Parts moving already.
There's going to be a quarterback carousel and a coaching carousel as well. A lot of coaching vacancies that need to get filled. Obviously, so far, some have been filled. Obviously, the biggest one is Sean Payton to the Broncos.
Yep.
And Frank Reich to the Panthers. D'Amico Ryan to the Texans.
And Brian Flores is now on the Vikings.
He's as a coordinator.
As a coordinator, yes.
But honestly,
linebacker coach to...
I think that's a great fit because the Vikings defense was horrible at the back end of the year. So Brian Flores, I'm really glad you're moving on. It's rumored Eric Bieniemy may move to offensive coordinator for the Ravens. We shall see. Obviously, the Ravens need to get their shit together when it comes to fucking paying Lamar.
Yeah, but from what I saw, they're over $100 million off.
Yeah, that's the latest story. Is that they're $100 million off in guaranteed money. So, but obviously, we'll talk about that in the offseason. That's going to be a huge story if Lamar stays in Baltimore or moves off somewhere else. So, believe me, we will talk about that.
Something I also saw that a team and a specific player are not on the terms of contract. Aaron Lazard and the Green Bay Packers are having contract disputes, and apparently they're way off too.
He's probably going to hit the open market, and I wouldn't doubt
that. Which I would be fine with. Come to fucking Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Come to Pittsburgh.
I mean, granted, he would make, honestly, a good 3. Because you have George Pickens at 1, Deontay Johnson at 2, and then you have him at 3, and then you have a Ferrari Muth there as a tight end.
And then you draft 1.
And then, boom. And you're fine. You just need, honestly, I think for the Steelers, you just need a good offensive line.
Well, yeah,
that's where it comes from.
As of right now, we have someone. Who was it? It was a guard from, I think it was either Minnesota or the Chargers, who has been like really adamant about wanting to come to Pittsburgh. He wants to come to Pittsburgh. A couple of mock drafts show us drafting early, not first round, because first round everyone has us going for Joey Porter Jr. at cornerback, which I love. I love the idea of going for Joey Porter Jr.
Oh, he's a corner? Okay. I thought it was a linebacker.
No, cornerback.
Okay. Honestly,
I love it.
Do it.
I love it.
Do it.
I love it. But they have us drafting linemen 3rd, 4th, and 5th round.
That's what they need.
3 in a row. 2nd round, we might go ahead and try and steal another linebacker, which is just something we habitually do. I don't know why we burn 2nd round draft picks on fucking linebackers. I will never understand that.
I don't know. Well, that is another thing to look forward to this year in the offseason is the draft. There's going to be a lot of great young players from college coming into the NFL, and we had some exciting rookies this year. It's to think about what those guys are going to do their second year, and then the upcoming freshman class for this 2023 season is going to be something special.
Something else that I actually saw, thinking about the Steelers in the offseason, who they actually just gave an open workout? Thaddeus Moss.
I thought he was drafted already.
But we gave him an open workout.
Oh, is he?
He was an undrafted free agent. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, but they cut him at some point?
I guess they made him. They kept him on the training team. They never put him on the 52-man roster.
Okay.
So they gave him an open workout.
Hey, that's not a bad place to go. It's Pittsburgh.
Wouldn't be a bad idea.
Hey, look, there's going to be a lot of, especially young quarterbacks coming into the league. Believe me, you're going to be hearing a lot of Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Caleb Williams, Joey Porter. So there's going to be a lot. Believe me, when the time comes, we're going to be talking about the draft.
I think there's another Sewell coming in the draft too.
Probably.
I think there is.
The Sewell brothers.
Yeah.
But we have some exciting things. The draft, free agency, and just any trades that are going to happen this offseason. And believe me, we will keep track of it all, and we will make sure that we tell you guys all the latest news when it comes to football.
Can't wait. Do you have any final thoughts as to?
No, we will be doing a Super Bowl recap after the Super Bowl, obviously. That will be our last episode of this season, and then we're going to take a couple months break and probably come back sometime
right before the draft.
The draft, and talk about the draft a little bit and free agency and free agency recap and all that stuff. So we're going to take a little bit of a break after the Super Bowl, but make sure you do tune in next week for our Super Bowl recap, and we will also be saying thank you to everyone as well. And I just want to say thank you so much for a wonderful season. Not only you, my brother, but for everyone watching as well. This was a fun year, and I can't wait for next season either.
Yeah, it's hard to think that this season's over already. It seems like just yesterday we were sitting down and it was mid-August, and we were doing our first episode of the year, and we were just talking about the upcomings, doing our bold predictions and everything like that. That was right before week 1. And now we're sitting here 4 days away from Super Bowl, and I don't think either of us really saw anything that happened this year that was going to happen.
No.
When it comes to this season, there's only one word that you could really describe it, and that is just electric.
Absolutely.
This is one of the most electric seasons. There was something different in the air this year, and we both called it week one that there was going to be sparks everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of how much fun this year was, it doesn't even come. You can't even put words into it. But yeah, like Halpin said, we will be here next week to talk the Super Bowl, and then we will be back later on in the year to talk the draft. So please leave a like, a comment, subscribe to our page. Please, we will be here next week. Yeah, and another fun year is in the books, man.
Absolutely. Have a fun Super Bowl. Be safe, be smart, and we will catch you all next week.
Be here next week. Thanks, guys.